you're doing that, you're going to have an early night tonight, right? And that's sort of like, well, we're going to punish you with going to bed. That's sort of not a positive message about sleep. What they actually found was that the electronics before bed didn't actually make any difference to going to sleep. In fact, the worst thing was audiobooks.
Really?
So for kids, when they get sleepy, they get hyperactive. If your kid is hyperactive, you should consider what's going on at night. Are they snoring?
Kia ora, welcome to Parents We've Met. Great to have you here. I'm glad you found the podcast. Now, it's called Parents We've Met because it's normally myself and Jenny Hale. She is parent coach and author. She is amazing, but she has got the flu, so she is not here. She's been looking after her grandkids and now she's got it. So hopefully she is back soon. But today I'm not alone because I'm joined by Dan Ford. He is a sleep psychologist from the Better Sleep Clinic. So thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me, Dayna, and hopefully while we're talking you don't fall asleep. That would not be a good thing.
Well, you've got quite a soothing voice there, so maybe I might, have a little snore at some point. I won't. But I'm really glad that you are here. And I've been thinking a lot about all the different questions, and even people in the office knowing that we had a sleep psychologist coming in, they were giving me from a friend questions. So there's a bunch to get through today. I thought a good place to start, though, is just saying, parenting, I feel like we can be really hard on ourselves as parents, as caregivers. And I feel like sleep has been probably where I feel my biggest failure in parenting, if I'm completely honest. And not on my kids' sleep, but more on my own sleep and protecting my sleep. I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I feel like they're just little ninjas that come into our bed every night. And I can't remember the last time I had a full night's sleep. Do you have parents coming in to see you that have similar stories? Am I not alone in this?
Oh, you're definitely not alone. So we predominantly work with adults and sometimes with adolescents, but certainly we'll see it's sort of a slightly more complex problem. We're working typically with insomnia, and then when the parents got insomnia, and then they've also got the concern that their child's going to wake them up in the middle of the night on top of their own wake-ups, then it definitely creates a little bit of a more complex dynamic. But then a lot of parents realise, and that's for males and females, so we'll see the dads as well with that concern. But then often the parents do realise that actually once their child's sleeping fine, actually they realise it hasn't got that much to do with my child. I'm still awake and I'm not getting back to sleep. So
yeah. We'd love to know that other people are struggling in parenting, that we're not alone. I'm curious, you've got all the tools, you've done the research, but what's sleep been like in your home with your kids? Have you gone through any stages that you kind of struggle with sleep or for them?
So we've got a blended family. I've got a 19-year-old, a 22-year-old, and so that's another different area of sleep, right, once you're into those age groups. But we've also got, I've got my own 10-year-old now, and so we've certainly, with him, we came through from birth onwards. I think the hardest thing about parenting is there's no, well, you could argue there are handbooks, but there aren't really, right? There's no necessarily one right way to do it. And so with sleep, even though people would expect, you know all these different interventions and stuff like that, the thing is, I've got my wife, Jess, and I can tell her this is how it's done, theoretically, but if she doesn't want to do it, hey, we've got to come to some sort of compromise. So in terms of what you should do and what we did do, two different things.
Yeah.
So hey, it's just the way it is.
Teenagers and sleep, it changes a lot as they get older. How are you finding having teenagers, and are they sleeping in longer now?
So that's definitely a teenager thing, and they don't tend to manage their sleep very well, and they definitely don't see that connection between how you sleep and your emotions and stuff like that. So, but hey, I probably didn't see that until I was sort of getting into my late 20s anyway myself. So.
Sounds like some big feelings in your home then with some maybe sleep-deprived teenagers.
I don't think they're sleep-deprived, no.
No, okay, they're making up for it. I was looking into sleep, and I was really surprised to discover that there's over 80 sleeping disorders. What are the main ones that people come to you about?
So we typically will see people for insomnia. So just to give people a good sense of things, the sleep disorders overall, they kind of break down. I mean, you could say there's ones that have people very sleepy and they can't sort of stay awake during the day. And then you've got ones where they tend to make people sort of wired, if you like, and so they tend to be very fatigued, so they don't have energy, but they're not sleepy. In fact, they tend not to be sleepy in the slightest, and they can't sleep. So the psychologists tend to deal with the people who can't sleep at all, and then the medical doctors in the sleep medicine field deal with the people, typically more of the ones who are very sleepy and stuff like that. So we tend to see people with insomnia. We see people with what we call body clock disorders or circadian rhythm disorders. So that's when your sleep's okay, but the timing of it's quite unusual. So with teenagers, go to bed very late, get up very late, but in the middle the sleep's fine. You just can't get them out of bed. So that's sometimes a signal of a circadian rhythm or sleep body clock disorder. There's a few other ones, parasomnias. So these are those sort of nightmares, constant nightmares. Things like sleepwalking, talking, sometimes that falls into our realm as well. And we provide behavioural support or psychological support for all the other ones. Like if you have narcolepsy, you can't stay awake during the day, it has a big impact on your life. So we, depression and things like that are quite big. So we can provide support to those as psychologists in that area. So it's a full range, but we tend to see the more sleepless people.
I'm not feeling too bad about my kids waking me up in the middle of the night now. I'm wondering, because sometimes, we can lose sleep and then we kind of think, we'll try and make up for it. We'll catch up on sleep. Is that a thing? Like, can we catch up on our sleep, or is that a bit of a myth?
You can catch up on your sleep, but the way it works is different from I think most people think. So your body is designed to catch up on sleep by giving you a deeper, more intense sleep. So typically you don't have to try to give yourself more. If you keep things relatively steady in terms of the rhythm to your sleep, so you get up at a similar time after a difficult night, you go about your day as per usual, turn up to work, all that sort of stuff, you might notice that you're sleepier. But if you go to bed at a similar time, what you'll find is if we put all those things on your head and have a look at your EEG, you'll get a deeper sleep. More of that night will be made up of what we call deep sleep, or stage 3, slow wave sleep. That's the deep restorative stuff, and it's more intense. So you don't necessarily have to catch up by giving yourself more time. There's probably an evolutionary thing, right? If you had to catch up one for one, well, our ancestors will be lying out on the, after a night hunt, they'll be lying out on the plains for, vulnerable for hours and hours and hours. So it kind of makes sense from a survival perspective that the catching up goes by a deeper, more intense sleep, and the hours can often remain the same.
So what's happening, talk us through like that cycle, what's happening, in our body and our brain through that cycle, and where do dreams come into it?
So when you go to sleep at night, it won't be all one thing. You have what we call sleep architecture. So that's how your sleep is designed, I guess, through the night, and you go through different stages. So the definition changes over time, but you got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4.
Nice.
Sorry, no, you don't have stage 4 anymore. You have what we call rapid eye movement sleep. So stage 1 is just sort of dropping off. It lasts for about 5 minutes or so. Stage 2, you'll see it on your watch. It'll say, that was light sleep, but it makes up at least 50% of your night typically. So if you see that on your watch, don't panic. That's normal, right? Stage 3 is the deep sleep stuff. That's restorative for your muscle cells and all that sort of stuff. That bit there is only a small amount of your night, maybe somewhere between 5% and maybe up to 15%. And then that last stage, rapid eye movement sleep, this is where the vivid dreaming occurs. So this is where essentially what your body's and brain is doing is processing emotions quite a bit through that time. But you will dream through the rest of the night. It's just that the dreaming is quite mundane, and so it often just looks like daytime thinking. So sometimes when you're lying there at night for hours thinking, I was awake all last night, why was my brain so busy? It may be actually that you're in a light sleep and you're having this sort of dreaming that is a lot like daytime thinking. Yeah.
Wow. And so is that similar for our kids, that whole cycle of what's happening?
So no, it isn't. It's different when you're a kid. When you're a newborn, you actually enter into your sleep through rapid eye movement sleep. So as an adult, you won't do this unless you've got a sleep disorder. So with newborns, we call it active sleep, and then so that's actually what you enter into sleep through. Your less active sleep is more like those stages 1, 2, and 3. Now, kids' sleep cycles are shorter; they're about 60 minutes. So this is why you might find your little your little one wakes up, at all these inconvenient times for you, probably right when you're just entering into your deep sleep.
Wow. I'm wondering, because I wake up a lot in the night, and then sometimes it can be the same time. Like every night you might be waking up, at 3 a.m, 4 a.m. Why does that happen? Is there any, I suppose it could be just there's a lot that I'm processing or on my mind, or I'm not naturally going into my next cycle of sleep.
I guess you're getting into more of the geeky sort of bits and bobs of how your sleep-wake system works. But essentially, when you go off to sleep at night, your brain is designed, if we just say brain, because sleep is a special activity for your brain. So when you go off to sleep at night, your brain will preferentially give you your non-dream sleep, or this sort of stage 1, 2, 3 deep sleep. And so what it's actually doing is, this is the physically restorative stuff. So it's pushing that up front. And so that's what you're going to get first. And then as you get more and more of that, you're discharging that kind of sleep into the second half, or the last back bit of the night. You start to get more of this dream sleep coming up. And there's some studies that suggest that those two are related. So as you discharge your non-dream sleep, then the dream sleep starts to come up. And so getting to the punchline, though, is that usually when you're waking up at 2 or 3, it's you could look at it as a problem, or you could look at it as actually your body's giving you feedback. You haven't built up enough of the sleep pressure, or what we call sleep drive, from your daytime activity to keep you sleeping through the entire night. And so one of the solutions to that is, surprisingly, is spend less time lying in bed. Yeah, so actually lengthen out your day a bit more, because that's actually what builds up sleepiness.
So maybe like either going to bed later or waking up.
Correct.
Because I heard, and I know you can't believe everything you see on reels and stuff on social media, but that an hour's sleep before midnight equates for like 2 hours of sleep in the bank. Is that true?
No, but as I was sort of saying, because your body will catch up preferentially on that non-dream sleep at the start, it could feel deeper. I guess any time you go to sleep, whether it be 2 a.m. in the morning or 10 p.m., you're going to get your sleep need. That non-dream sleep is going to come up front anyway, and your body's going to act to get rid of that. So in that sense, it's not going to be any different. So I don't necessarily know why, but some people may find that if they are sleeping better aligned with what their body clock likes, then they might find that sleep a bit better. Because if I talk to all the night owls and you ask them, when do you feel you get the better sleep, they will typically say in the second half of the night. So it's not all. Because,
when I talk to people, I feel like I'm a night owl. I feel quite productive, like I would like sometimes catch up on work and stuff, like 11 to 12. I feel like I get a lot done. But is that, are people just wired that way? Some people are early morning people, some are night owls, or is that more of a routine and what we're just sort of building into our habits?
It is a genetic thing. So they've got the genes that influence that. They've sort of noted what they are, and so, there is definitely a genetic component, but I do think they're also starting to realise there's a reasonably strong behavioural component as well, because your sleep and wake system, so I always try and refer to it as a sleep-wake system, because those two are, your body clock is really determining alertness, right? So that's the wake side of the equation. But if you, as I sort of mentioned, the thing that builds up sleepiness is actually the length of your waking active day. So if you get up really late, you'll probably end up not being sleepy till quite late as well. So that your behaviour will push you towards that night type as well. So, but for someone genetically more wired to be night, it'll be harder for them to get into a morning rhythm than someone who is more morning type, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing in genetics, and because I always feel bad when I stay up late, but actually it feels like it works for me. So maybe I'll not worry so much about that. What about the difference with males and females? And then you've got women with we're all different hormones, and then going into perimenopause. How does that affect our sleep?
So women's sleep does does change, say with their menstrual cycle, and so there's periods where sleep is worse, and then where sleep sort of smooths out. So sometimes my clients will talk to me about that. I've noticed it's really terrible just before my period, and then it gets better and stuff like that. So that's the thing. And then women tend to be more morning oriented than men. Right, so they have an earlier body clock than men, and so they also tend to sleep a little bit longer than men and tend to spend a bit more time in bed than men. But they also report worse sleep than men. Right, they report worse sleep than men. But if you look at it objectively through a sleep test or something in the lab, men usually come out with a lot worse sleep. But men won't report. They'll just say my sleep was good. So subjective. One big weird thing in sleep medicine, and especially behavioural sleep medicine, is what someone experiences their sleep like is actually almost got no correlation to what the objective test of their sleep will be like. So there's this big sort of difference. Yeah. So
I kind of think, like when you look at the stats of guys going to the doctors and stuff, I mean, it feels like it goes in, oh yeah, it's all good.
Too.
She'll be right. It was fine.
This can be true too. Yeah.
What would you say? Because women, we suffer more with insomnia. Where do you start with when people come to see you to try and fix that?
So I guess my sort of simple explanation for what can happen is part of it will be that your sleep-wake system in your body can get out of kilter, right? And if that gets disrupted for anyone, that's those nights where maybe these things are a bit more stressful and you can't sleep as well. So that's normal, right? But the other part of the sleep problem will be, well, what's going on with the stress reaction, right? If I have this difficult night and then I start reacting to it and I start changing everything up, then what can happen is sometimes you can stop your body from recovering normally. And then what happens is you start getting another night down the track that's disrupted, and then another night, and then another night. So a problem like insomnia is a mind and a body problem, and we have to sort of work on both of those. So we'll often start with understanding how that sleep-wake system works, showing people how it's getting disrupted, and then start making changes to get that going a bit better for them. They might start sleeping better from that, but then also we have to start working on those other bits and pieces in the mind and emotion space. And so then we often get into that as we go through treatment. Yeah.
I know when I've struggled with sleep, it's almost like you're like so aware of I'm awake, I shouldn't be awake, and it's like that extra stress of like thinking about it, and you can see how you'd all of a sudden be in a bit of a spiral.
Yeah, so that and that's what you're talking to a psychologist, so I would say that's judgment, right? There's a judgment of this shouldn't be happening, right? And so that's a reaction to that, right? As opposed to, oh, I'm awake, So I always know my clients are going to do better if I say, hey, look, we're going to have to change up that schedule, and then they'll be like, oh, I'm going to have to spend a bit less time in bed. Oh, that's great, because I don't have enough time for myself at the moment. I know that person's going to go well because they've got something to do. There's something meaningful for them to do during this time as they move through treatment. Whereas someone who says, oh my God, what will I do? That's a secondary problem that we have to sort of resolve.
Well, that's the struggle I think all parents have. It's like when you get the kids to sleep, sometimes you're exhausted and you feel like you want to go to sleep, but then you're like, I've got time for myself. Like I need to stay awake. I need to have some space and do something for me. So it's that juggalo.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely noticed that one. So I think sometimes, what do they call it? Bedtime procrastination. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I've been talking more about our adult sleep because I think sometimes we're so focused on our kids, but we need to actually give ourselves some time. But now thinking about kids, you have a mnemonic. This is a word that I've only learned after meeting you. What is a mnemonic, and how do you use that with breaking down sleep?
Yeah, so yes, not demonic as we're talking about, mnemonic, but I won't try and spell it. But so it comes from research studies, or at least a bunch of clinicians came up with it. So ABCs of sleeping, and they have tested it to see do the parts hold up, and generally they do to scientific research. So the A, B, and C is age-appropriate bedtimes, and so that's remembering that across the lifespan, in childhood, sleep will change. So your newborn is not going to have the same sleep need as your 15-year-old. So you can't send your 15-year-old to bed at the same time as you put down your newborn, right? Because the 15-year-old would definitely complain about that, and you'll probably cause them a sleep problem. So that's age-appropriate bedtimes, but also remembering that for most of childhood, sort of through to the early teen years, most of the research suggests 9 p.m. is probably the time most kids will be doing pretty well by going to bed by.
Yeah.
So that's age-appropriate bedtimes.
So 9 o'clock, by 9 o'clock, because I find I put my kids in bed about, I don't know, 7:30, they read maybe for half an hour and then asleep at 8. But I suppose not all kids...
Oh, sorry, no later than 9.
No later than 9, okay. So
That
there's a
makes
lot
a
of
bit
people
more sense,
listening going, oh my goodness, I put my kid to bed at 6:30.
Yeah, but if they're younger, of course, they have a bigger sleep need, so
Yeah.
they would have to go to bed earlier. But I guess what I'm putting in place is that backstop for those parents who are like, oh yeah, my 7-year-old's in bed by 11, or something like that. So
okay,
so,
by 9?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you got consistency, so that's the C of ABC. And so that's keeping that consistent pattern for them as well, so things aren't moving around all the time. And that would also apply to wake times. So wake times are the thing that gets forgotten for most of the public, but for the sleep practitioners, wake time is technically the most important thing, because that keeps everything in a consistent pattern from the time that you get up.
Because school holidays come around and the sleep times are all over the show, and it can be really hard when you get back into a new term. So you're sort of saying, if we want to do ourselves a favour, try and stick to the same sort of routine even in holidays and weekends.
Yeah, so usually easier when they're younger. And so I mean, we keep an alarm for my son. It's a sunrise alarm, and it just has a sort of a gentle period of waking up, but it also adds light to the room over a sort of half-hour period, and we found that that's quite good for getting him up. And we might let him sort of lie there for a little bit, but we try and keep it not sort of more than half an hour. And because what will happen is, if he didn't get enough sleep, eventually he's going to get sleepy and he'll fall asleep a lot earlier in an upcoming night. So the body will adjust.
I tried to get those clocks, that kind of have the blue light and then the yellow light when it's time to get up. And I'm trying to show my kids, this is when I think there's a book that you read and it tells a story about some chicken going to sleep. They liked the book, the clock was out the window, they just did not stick to it. So next, schedules and routine, and then location.
So schedules and routines is all about similar to that consistency piece as well, and the routines is about how you often applied to how you wind down at night. Having a few things that you do. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's some prayers or a mass, a little short back rub or something, but something that's pretty regular and consistent for your kids, and that helps with the going to sleep piece. You could also think about consistency on routines and getting up as well. Right, so that's the other bit. As I said, we don't really think about it, but sometimes with my clients, I'm saying, okay, well, we need to get a wake up routine going on and some consistency there.
What is a wake up routine? I've got to ask, because for me, it's a coffee, and that's probably not what my body needs straight away.
That can be a thing. It depends on how hard it is for the person to get up. And so the night owls are the people that tend to really struggle with getting up, whereas obviously the morning types are
they've already done their yoga, meditation, read a book. Yeah.
So. It might be having a shower, it might be getting bright light, not sleeping, not hitting the snooze button. It could be just throwing the covers off, and chaining a few things together. Ring a friend if you need to. So it might be having a coffee, or it might be even, if it's really hard, you make the coffee the night before, put it in a flask and put it next to your bed. So you got a hot coffee right there.
Next level.
So there's different things there, but usually we give people a bit of a menu and then say, well, let's pick a few and try a few, because different strokes for different folks. So.
I thought you were going to say, Dayna, have a glass of water first, then the coffee, hydrate, but no, you're like,
nah.
I can just do the coffee.
Yeah.
Great.
But hydration's good. Hydration's definitely good.
So schedules, routine, location, exercise and diet, no electronics in the bedroom or before bed.
Yeah, so location is about the regularity of where your child sleeps, and also thinking about there's sort of big picture and there's small picture. So big picture is, where's our house? obviously that's a bit harder to change, but, noisy, the research does suggest, the noisier the neighbourhood and that, the harder it is for children to sleep. But then also it's actually a bit mixed for things like whether or not you have other kids, they got a bunk bed and got someone else. It's a little bit mixed there in terms of whether that's worse for sleep or not. I think generally children do a little bit better with their own room. That's sort of understandable, but not always achievable. So that's that location piece. Then we've got exercise and diet. So that was interesting because the research suggested that actually kids who exercise sleep shorter. But exercise is obviously a very good thing. So the changes will be undoubtedly due to something good. And what it probably is that when you exercise, you get a more intense deep sleep. So what's probably happening is they're getting a more refreshing sleep, and so they don't need the quantity because they've got the quality. So I definitely wouldn't sacrifice exercise in that sense. Diet, that's your, fats and sugars, they're the culprits for everything, and so keeping a nice, relatively natural foods to your child's diet will help their sleep.
I just remember my great-grandfather used to say, if you want some good dreams, have a piece of cheese before you go to sleep. That just came then. Do what we're eating, does it affect our dreams?
There was a bit of research there, and they did actually find, that was this year, so I was interviewed about that. But what they found was, yes, cheese did, but it's not to do with cheese per se, it's to do with lactose intolerance. So it affects your gut, and then your gut is feeding back to your brain, right? And then your dreams are a bit messed up because your tummy's not too happy.
Oh, yeah, he said, you get weird, vivid dreams if you have some cheese. Okay.
Yeah. So the other E was electronics.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's been an interesting one because what the research really suggests is now is that it's not electronics before bed, it's having the electronics in the room. Right. So there was a study done by actually Otago, a New Zealand study, and they had little cameras, kind of weird, but going into people's rooms to see what
they knew the cameras were there.
To see what the children were doing before bed, and what they actually found was that the electronics before bed didn't actually make any difference to going to sleep. In fact, the worst thing was audiobooks.
Really?
Yeah. So
why is that?
I think because they're kind of exciting, the kids' ones, right? They've always got the voice, like, if I listen to something, it's monotonous, like it's a lecture on something that I want to learn about, and I never get through any of it. I fall asleep. But the kids' ones, the volume's changing, and your brain will alert to that. And obviously, kids are kind of like, oh, it's really exciting.
I need to make my bedtime stories then a little bit more like this, because I sometimes do the voices of my kids.
Bedtime stories are fine. I think it's probably the cutoff, right?
Yeah.
So I've noticed this because lately my 10-year-old's been listening to audiobooks, and I'll find that, if I leave it playing, I could come back into his room and an hour later and he's still wide awake listening. But if I just cut it off at a certain time and then I go back in and sort of 10 or 15, he's asleep. So it does, he's probably keeping himself awake to try and hear everything. So electronics out of the room.
We also, we've got a digital parenting course, and some of the research shows that, our tweens and teenagers, between the times of midnight and 5 a.m. are getting onto social media and stuff, so it totally makes sense not to have electronics in the room.
Yeah, I think one of the sensible things I saw was, try and have some sort of central charging point where and it's out of the room, and it's not somewhere where the kids can sneak out and grab it as well. So it's probably in your parents' room with all the stuff, the alarms turned off.
So after that, it was P, positivity and relaxation. This can be both towards sleep and the sleep environment as well as emotional environment.
Yeah, so what that's getting at is, so there's a broader picture of just, good emotions during the day, things are going well in the environment, in the family, home, the relationships and that. And the other one is not using the room as a punishment in this, or using bed and going to sleep as a punishment, right? Because you're like, right, if you're doing that, you're going to have an early night tonight, right? And that's sort of like, well, we're going to punish you with going to bed. So it's sort of not a positive message about sleep. So so that's what they're getting at with that.
I feel like if Jenny was here, Jenny, if she was here, she'd have all this great insights. But I think too, because we talk about time in and time out, and sometimes I think time out is in the bedroom, but we try and say if you're going to use it, it's not that in the heat of the moment, like go to your room. It's like, hey, I think, you need some quiet time. Maybe go read a book, you're obviously feeling frustrated, so it's in that kind of, but I can imagine if it was always go to your room, go to bed. That was a negative thing. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Independence with falling asleep. This is something that, because I go, oh, my kids, they're so small, and then, and I'll miss this, and all of a sudden I hear, oh, when they're 7, they're really good at being more independent, naturally falling asleep, and then you're 8 and we're still here. So tell me more about this independence piece.
So that's the one that is big in, I guess, Western societies, right? Is that independence, that the child falls asleep by themselves and can do that by themselves and doesn't need an association. So that might be the parent there or whatever else, a bottle or so self-soothing comes into it. So that's the independence piece, and obviously that has a huge amount of research behind it. But the truth is, if you really look across the globe, it's only Western societies that have this expectation that the child will sleep by themselves by this certain age, and everyone else is just like, we just sort of roll,
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different ways to manage it. So so it just depends. I think the main thing is you find something that works and that you're happy with it.
Yeah.
And then you don't put pressure on yourself for it to be a certain way. And
I think it's when we share stories, parents, and you hear about Sally who's sleeping through, and you're like, oh, what am I doing? But my boy says, Mum, I want it to be like Madai Styles. Let's just all be in the same room together. That would be his dream. And I suppose that works for a lot of families.
Yeah. So and that's pretty traditional, right? I mean, if you think about other societies like the Japanese, they won't have the luxury of multiple rooms and stuff. So, and historically, because there is a book written on the historical sleep thing, and peasants back in the day, which is virtually pretty much all of us would have been, you just have one bed and everyone sleeps in it if you have a bed, and all your cattle are in your house as well, so no one steals it. So. So sleep has definitely changed over the years.
So next was needs of child met during the day. That's the N equals great sleep.
Yeah, so that's that last bit, and it is very similar to the positive emotions, but having your needs met and stuff like that, and so that positive sort of mental and physical environment for children. Obviously, then sleep is better. I'll see people with that have been traumatized or whatever, and so that and you look in the PTSD diagnostic criteria. One of them is disrupted sleep. So all those sorts of things can then show up as disrupted sleep as well. So hence the making sure needs are met and it's positive and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. I would love to talk about using sleep aids, because I feel like there's a lot of melatonin gets pushed and talked about. And then there's other things like magnesium or herbal medicines. What's your take on that?
So the short answer is I think most of them are a waste of money. So we've got to remember it is a $1 billion industry to sell you some sort of supplement for something, and so there's plenty on the shelves for sleep. If they worked, you wouldn't see 50 of them on the shelf, right? So they don't do much, and if anything, I mentioned before that idea that you've got your sleep-wake system and then you've got your stress system. So most of them will do something maybe on the stress system. They're not really doing anything about the sleep-wake system itself. Or if they are, it's very mild. So most of them are just working on that. And if your sleep-wake system's out of kilter, you could be relaxed as anything, right? You could be like the Buddha, but you're not going to sleep that well. So I have to think about sort of that bigger picture. Melatonin is one that you do see a lot of, and it is indicated for neurodiverse children, so say autistic spectrum and stuff like that, because they do have some sleep difficulties, and sometimes for something like ADHD and stuff like that. So there are some indications, but that should be done with your GP, because if you just go and buy it online and ship it into New Zealand, what people don't realise is that these are not regulated. So in New Zealand, you get a prescription, it's regulated, it's pure. You get it from overseas, it's been made in a factory somewhere where you don't know where, and what most of the studies show is that it can. So they found some melatonin pills have 400 or 600 times more melatonin than they say on the label, or 400% less, or they've got something else in them that's not on the label. So you're really sort of giving your kids stuff that that you don't know what's in it.
So I've not tried it, but I heard, has it changed recently that you can actually buy it over the counter? Has there been a bit of a shift?
It is shifting. I don't know where it's at, but I think you can get it via your pharmacist. Yeah.
Okay.
Or very soon you can.
Sometimes I use magnesium because I feel like my boy goes through growing pains in his legs. And so maybe it's not helping, but in my head, I'm like, maybe when he's had days he's been really physical, I'll give him a bit of magnesium to see if that will help. Even more like magnesium cream, like massaging his legs.
Okay, yeah.
And that does seem to, but maybe it's...
So when it comes to something like magnesium, that's interesting as well, because if you look in all the research, they typically only do it with the researchers with older adults. So that fortunately doesn't yet include myself. But that means that you're not looking at the same population as most of the people that are taking the magnesium. But what they do find is it can help improve sleep, but it quite possibly helps improve sleep partly through helping with muscle aches and pains. So it is indicated for that. But there are a few different types. I think maybe magnesium malate is the one that is most for the muscles. And so that can also help another sleep disorder, which parents should be aware of, which is called restless legs syndrome. It does get confused for growing pains. But if your kid, it's an unusual thing, because like if I just don't eat and do a bunch of exercise after a day or two, literally, no food, I will start to get that because it's to do with iron stores in the central nervous system. But basically, it feels like something's crawling through your skin, or it feels like that. It can feel like that deep ache. So not a sort of pain at the surface, and that's where it can get confused with growing pains, right? Because you got those deep aches sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thinking of like sleep hygiene and for adults, for parents, caregivers, what should we be doing as we prepare for sleep? I know with my kids, I'm giving them a bath, I'm reading a book, but what about for us?
So the sleep hygiene stuff is probably good for normal sleepers, can help them sleep a bit better. So for all you people that have diagnosable insomnia, it's not going to help you. So you should just drop it because they start doing 5,000 things to try to force sleep to happen. So that's really key. You can't force sleep to happen. So really the only thing there with sleep hygiene is we just say to people, do something you enjoy, right? And don't focus on sleep. So, because when you're doing something you enjoy, generally speaking, if you get really sleepy, which is a physiological process, you're in the middle of reading your book, and then suddenly the book falls out of your hands, right? Because you're falling asleep. So that's the thing. If you're vigilant and you're like, am I sleepy yet? Am I sleepy yet? Well, guess what? It's not going to happen, because vigilance is the opposite of what you need to be to go to sleep. So really, that's our simple advice: is you do stuff that you enjoy doing.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm just thinking of all the dads out there like talking to their wives tonight. Well, Dad said, I'm like, no.
So you've got to take me with a grain of salt, because I'm working with those people who have quite severe, problems falling asleep and stuff like that.
I think I'm blushing now. Just a couple more questions, because I'm finding this all fascinating. We could talk all day. Another thing that I've seen online talked a lot about is this whole thing of like sleeping with your mouth open. And I found myself tiptoeing, like opening my door, checking on my kids, like, is your mouth open or closed? And quite often, like one of my kids, their mouth is open. Is that a bad thing? Like, is it something to be concerned about? Because it's talked about online like it's a bit of a mouth open, not great.
No, but I personally, I wouldn't care, but I think snoring is something that you should pay attention to for your children, because a young child shouldn't really be snoring, and it can be a sign of some sort of disordered breathing and sleep. So you're not really asking about this, but when for an adult, that loud snoring, especially for a male, can be a sign of obstructive sleep apnea. Now, with a child, same thing. But when an adult has obstructive sleep apnea, what it tends to do is it breaks up your sleep cycles, right? So they all become fragmented. And so people might say, I slept for 8 hours, but I feel like I didn't get a wink. And the truth is they didn't, because all their sleep stages are chopped up. And so then they will get very sleepy, right, during the day. And if it's quite severe, moderate to severe, and that's where you get the classic person falling asleep at the wheel. But that doesn't show up in the same way for kids. So for kids, when they get sleepy, they get hyperactive. So this is important because if your kid is hyperactive, you should consider what's going on at night. Are they snoring? Because it may be a much more simple solution than we've got to give them these drugs for ADHD. It might be actually we need to get their tonsils out. And because that's about 90% effective for kids in snoring and can improve then their daytime behaviour and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never heard that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we have a lot of parents watching that and listening that have got younger kids, and they'll be doing things like moving from a cot to a bed or dropping naps. Any tips for them? Good luck.
I don't do so much in the pediatric space. I was just thinking about one of the interventions that we do is for usually it's if the child is in the cot, it's a bit easier to do, which is the one where you have the parent stays in the room, and what do they call, camping out?
Yep.
So that one's a bit easier if the child's in the cot. So sometimes it might be if you are having some difficulties and you're making that transition from cot to bed, it might be a good chance to take advantage of that kind of time to get your child sleeping a bit better independently in the cot, and then transfer them to the bed, because otherwise it's a lot easier for them to get up and come and, Mum, Dad, right?
Mum, I'm 6, gotta get out of the cot now.
Yeah.
Keep them there
that's right. Yeah. I'm 16, can I get out?
Hey, I appreciate all your insights, and actually I feel we probably are a lot more critical about our sleep in some ways that we don't need to be. I suppose it's more just how are you feeling in the day, and are you getting through the day okay?
Yeah, people ask that, how do I know if I'm getting good sleep? And myself and a psychiatrist that works in this space, Dr. Tony Fernando, we were laughing about this because he was like, well, when I thought about it, I was like, well, do you feel okay? Because if you feel okay, you're fine. And I was like, that's exactly what I say to people too, because that's all that counts, right? If you feel fine, who cares, right? The best thing for your sleep, that's something you shouldn't be paying attention to because you can't really control it. And actually, and you ask anyone who spends time trying to control their sleep, what happens? It gets worse, right? And so that's a real key thing with insomnia is people are trying to control their sleep because they believe something's wrong with it. And then what tends to happen is it gets worse and worse as they try harder to control it. So, what would someone who didn't care about their sleep do? Would they lie there for 4 hours trying to sleep? If the answer is no, don't do it because, good sleepers don't do it. So, yeah.
I should go back just what you're saying about with kids snoring. Where should parents go if they do notice that their child is snoring? Is it just straight to the GP as the first place to go?
Yeah, I think the GP's the place to go, and then the sleep stuff for parents in New Zealand, unfortunately, is very, very minimal. I can think of the paediatric sleep people that I know. I could count them on one hand. So, but Starship would be the next place that they might be referred to for something in that space. Okay. So GP.
Last thought for parents listening, any words of advice or things that we should be taking away, maybe our homework for tonight?
I think for parents, it's probably, it's don't stress about your sleep and don't stress about your child's sleep as much as possible, right? Because it doesn't help it. It just makes it worse. And then if you want things to do around your sleep, probably the one that people don't pay enough attention to is keeping things consistent with a regular sort of wake time. Same thing for your kids, right? Because that will definitely help them it's hard to get them, it might be hard to get your teenager out of bed, but it certainly helps to keep their sleep-wake cycles more in rhythm so they don't end up sort of falling asleep at 4 a.m. in the morning and that sort of thing. So yeah, but you have to remember, I work with people who are very worried about their sleep, and so I'm always going to play it down and say, hey, look, you'll be okay. It'll sort itself out for the most part. A few nights of disrupted sleep here and there is normal and natural, and your body has got its mechanisms to get things back into line. So don't stress about it.
Don't stress. If you want to know more about what Dan does, maybe you've got more questions, Better Sleep Clinic is the place to go find out more. And if Jenny's not here, but if you're thinking sleep is hard, I need a bit of a plan, I'd love a coach to come alongside me. parentingplace.nz is the place to find out more about us and how we can help.